that says that. I mean, the world has gotten warmer before. I mean, the Vikings the Vikings had settlements in Greenland. They had them there for years, for decades. And then they abandoned them because it got too cold. Okay? Well, the climate changed. It got warmer. It got colder. That just happens. Okay? SUVs didn't cause the Vikings to lose their settlements in Greenland. The main driver towards climate change is the sun. Now, should we do what we can to reduce our carbon footprint? Absolutely. Nobody wants to breathe nasty air. Nobody wants to do that. We should all do what we can within reason to reduce our carbon footprint. That does not mean going to $1.35 per kilowatt hour for electricity, because then people can't afford to turn lights on in their house. And that absolutely does not make things better. It just doesn't. But that was another reason that Peterson got canceled. And the reason the left canceled him, not the liberals, the left, the reason they canceled him, they said he was stupid. He was ignorant. He didn't understand. And that is a big problem with debate nowadays. And that's why I like Peterson. He doesn't call people names. He introduces another scenario. Consider this, not that. If what you're saying is true, then how do you explain that? He doesn't call names. When it comes to religion, he has an interesting way of looking at religion. He said, if pressed, I guess, yeah, you would call me a Christian. Well, he's not a Christian by definition alone, because he questions belief in God. He also questions the resurrection of Christ. Well, the resurrection of Christ is the foundation of Christianity. That is Christianity. So I respectfully say, yeah, you say you're a Christian, but you're not. But here's what Peterson says. When asked if he believes in God, he says, no, I really don't believe in God, but I'm afraid he may exist. Afraid he may exist. It's an interesting way to phrase things. When asked if he's a Christian, he says, I'm not sure, but I live my life as if Christianity is a real thing. Which, by the way, he's not the first one to do that. Charlemagne did that. Why did Charlemagne embrace Christianity? Because basically he looked around and said, look, there's a whole lot of these Christian people, and they're good people. They're kind people. If society embraced this way of living, society would be better. Guess what? I'm now a Christian, and I think everybody else should be too. That's why Charlemagne embraced Christianity, which is kind of why Peterson is embracing Christianity. His lectures are very thought-provoking. Now, I'm not saying you go to see one of his lectures. In fact, I would not recommend going to see one of his lectures unless you have first at least listened to his podcast several times and read at least one of his books. Reason being is the lectures don't do justice, and the lectures are just a snapshot of his ideology. His two books, The 12 Rules of Life, An Antidote to Chaos, that was his first big book, and his second one that I just finished this week, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules. They're not easy reads. In fact, I would not even say that they're entertaining books. I mean, you're not going to read this book and say, wow, I enjoyed that. But it is very enlightening, okay? Because, and shocking, this is why I like Jordan Peterson. His solutions are simple, but the implementations are not always easy. For example, The 12 Rules to Life, the first book, his rules are very basic. The first one is stand up straight with your shoulders straight. In other words, don't slouch. Just look like you're somebody. The three biggest words that defined Jordan Peterson and had people start to pay attention to him. He was asked a question, how do you solve the world's problems? His solution is make your bed. You think to yourself, what do you mean make your bed? Well, what he means is, look, you're not going to solve the Russian-Ukraine war. It's not going to happen. You have no control over that at all, unless you're Vladimir Putin, okay? You have no control over that at all. But what you do have control over is your own little fiefdom. You want to make the world better? Get up in the morning and make your bed. Then clean your room. Then clean your house. Get your own act in order. Stand up straight with your shoulders straight. Look like you care. Number 2, treat someone else like you're responsible for helping. Everybody respects someone who helps another. Treat yourself like that. In other words, a little bit of self-love. Befriend people who want the best for you. Years ago, I had a mentor who told me to avoid zealots. It's not a bad thing. You want to have friends. Everybody wants to have friends. Why not make friends of people who want the best for you, not for those who are trying to use you? Number 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not the useless person you are today. What does he mean by that? Well, in other words, progress. Don't look at yourself in the mirror and say you're a failure, you're a jerk, you're nothing. But look at yourself and say, you know what? You're a little better yesterday than you were the day before. The goal is to make yourself a little bit better tomorrow, because we'll never be perfect. Perfection will never come. But if we get a little bit better every day, that's really all you can do. And it's really all you can ask. Number 5, don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Let the kids have fun. If you're going to be their parent, they got to like you or they're not going to respect you. Number 6, set your own house in order before you criticize the world. That's rather biblical, isn't it? Remove the log from your eye before you attempt to remove the splinter from your neighbor's. Get your own house in order before you criticize the world. We live in a very, very ugly world that we really can't solve many of the problems, but you can solve your own problems, okay? Make your life better, and maybe that trickles down. Number 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Instant gratification. We do that all the time. Look at the long-term plan. What is meaningful? Is what we're doing helping others, helping the situation, or is it just giving us something temporarily that makes us smile and to hell with all the others? Pursue what's meaningful, not what's expedient. Number 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And I found that just amazing. In other words, we all have trouble telling the truth. We all like to spin things to make ourselves look better. That way we don't have to commit to anything. But if you don't, you should always tell the truth. But if you don't tell the truth, at least don't lie. Again, what would happen if nobody lied? Wouldn't that make the world a better place? It absolutely would. Number 9, assume the person that you are listening knows something that you don't. In other words, what's the old adage? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Shut up and you might learn something. Golden. 10, be precise in your speech. In other words, say what you mean and no more. Again, rather biblical for a non-Christian guy, don't you think? Number 11, do not bother children when they're skateboarding. In other words, these kids are having a good time. Maybe you're jealous of them. Maybe you wished you could be having a good time. Don't bother them. Let them play. Number 12, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. In other words, stop and smell the roses. Those are the 12 rules for life, an antidote to chaos. If you follow those rules, things get better. Jordan Peterson is an amazing author. His Beyond Order, 12 More Rules, very similar. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're all very similar. But the best one, and really the 12th rule in his second book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules, the 12th rule sums up all the rest. In fact, the 12th rule really sums up all 24 in both books. And it's be grateful in spite of your suffering. So what does that mean? Be grateful in spite of your suffering. We live in a very difficult world. Life is hard. It's very difficult. There's so many moving parts. There's so many opportunities for failure. There's so many people who are out there trying to take advantage of you. That's just the way things are. But life is good, folks. It just is. And while we've been thrown lots of curves in life, everybody has. We've been mistreated by others. We've been mistreated by government. We've been mistreated by people who hate us. We've been mistreated by a lot of people. Everybody has. And we've mistreated people as well. All of us have done that as well. But if you look at the life that you're living, especially if you live in the West, and I'd say 95 to 100, 95% of the people live in the West that listen to this podcast. I have about a 5% following. About 5% of the people who listen to my podcast are from India. Shout out to all the Geo Savan people. But especially if you live in the West, be grateful in spite of your suffering. Folks, we have so many things that are so good in our lives. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're listening via electricity. What do you have to do to get electricity into your house? Really nothing. It just happens. Okay. This was 100 years ago. That wouldn't have been the case. You cut your finger and it gets infected. You get some antibiotic and you're fine. 100 years ago, if you don't treat that infection in your finger, you could die of blood poisoning. We're so fortunate. Be grateful in spite of your suffering. My recommendation, and I'm not taking my own recommendations like I used to. I used to try to read a book a month, and I'm way behind. There's just too many other things going on in my life right now, so I haven't read as many books as I'd like. But I would highly recommend reading both, at least the first book, The 12 Rules of Life of Jordan Peterson. Again, they're not easy reads. They're not entertaining, but they're very, very enlightening. Jordan B. Peterson is truly, truly one of the smart guys around right now. He's a person, in my opinion, that 200 years from now, we will be reading about him. Like Carl Jung, like Sigmund Freud. We'll be reading about Jordan B. Peterson. He's a tortured soul who appears to me to actually be teetering on the brink of insanity. He ventures there often to the unknown. And I don't know why he does this. I don't think he can help himself. But each trip he makes, he comes back and with information to share with us, and it saps more life from his failing body. The tortured genius sharing his philosophy with others, perhaps out of obligation. I don't know why. But he's doing this for us, I believe, and we can get a lot out of it. My recommendation: listen to a podcast, read a book, look at a YouTube video. Jordan B. Peterson, one of the great minds of our world today. Well, that's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's where you can go ahead and get the James Strong Show podcast. Easiest way. Send me your email address. I will send you a link to the podcast upon publication. You can download it and listen to it at your leisure. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just go ahead and pick it up any place you can. You get podcasts. You just Google the James Strong Show. Bang, something comes up. Download it, listen to it. Have a good time. That's it. We're done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.